Hi, I'm Hal Roberts. Welcome. This is Bridge City News. Here's some of the top stories we've been following. Lethbridge police have charged a 28-year-old Lethbridge man with attempted murder following the attack of a city woman earlier this week. A criminal defense lawyer says the trial, which wrapped up involving two of the leaders of the Freedom Convoy, was a complete waste of taxpayers' money. And we hear from the mayor of Jasper, who speaks out about recovery efforts in his town following the summer's devastating wildfires.
Your nation, your province, your southern Alberta. From the heart of Lethbridge, it's Bridge City News with Hal Roberts.
Thanks so much for joining us. Lethbridge police have charged a 28-year-old man with attempted murder after he allegedly attacked a 27-year-old city woman at her home at 3:30 in the morning on Tuesday. Police say Corbin John Maxwell entered through the victim's apartment window and attacked her while she was sleeping with what police call a weapon of opportunity before escaping out through the same window. The woman was taken to Chinook Regional Hospital with serious head injuries. Police are calling the incident a random attack. Police say Maxwell and the victim did not know each other.
Following further investigation, surveillance video of the subject was obtained and he was identified by police. On September 11th, he was located and arrested without incident. I want to assure the public and the community that every available resource was extended in this investigation, and officers were relentless in their pursuit of and apprehension of the subject. We always ask our public to make sure that they're vigilant, making sure that their properties are safe, secure, and that they, of course, feel safe in their own homes. So good lighting is always a great option. Cameras are great deterrent as well. And making sure, and we know it's been a hot summer and, some windows are left open, but making sure that if you're going to be doing that you have measures in place that can detect that and prevent it from happening in the future.
The victim has since been released from hospital and is now living out of town. Maxwell has been remanded in custody and is expected to appear in court on September the 17th. Two people died and another was wounded following an attack at an encampment in Kingston, Ontario on Thursday. Police say they've made an arrest in connection with a violent daytime assault at a supervised injection site. Early reports indicate the suspect used both a blunt and an edged weapon in the attack. When officers arrived, they found the three victims along with the suspect. After negotiating with the suspect for a number of hours, he was finally taken into custody. Kingston Mayor Brian Patterson said he was horrified by the situation and has called for the encampment's removal along with the supervised consumption site to be shut down. The trial involving a couple of leaders with the Freedom Convoy has officially come to an end. The legal proceedings have wrapped up more than a year after they first began. Tamara Lich and Lich Barber are co-accused of mischief, intimidation, and counseling others to break the law. The two attended court virtually earlier today from their homes in Alberta and Saskatchewan. No verdict has been given out just yet. Ari Goldkind is a criminal defense lawyer who joins us now from Toronto to offer up his thoughts on the trial. Ari, do you think the Crown proved its case and that Barber and Lich could see some jail time?
We talk about them together, Lich and Barber. And the Crown's done that for a reason, and in my view, because the case against Barber was much stronger than the case against Lich. But by tying them in together and using words in the criminal justice system like conspiracy, you make it easier for the Crown to get one when on their own, this is Tamara Lich, would have been much tougher to get her. The bottom line is I think the Crown has presented an extraordinarily lousy case against Tamara Lich. They should not have been joined up together. As I've said to you before and to your viewers, this is one of the biggest wastes of taxpayer money. And by the way, in the millions. So if your audience doesn't know how expensive this is, 50, 60, 70 days of trial, every day that courtroom and those officers are doing this stupid trial, there are drunk drivers, rapists, and murderers that are not having their day in court. So there's that context. But do I think Lich Barber, and I could be wrong, the verdict is coming imminently, even by the time this is watched. I think Lich Barber is going to have a problem with one of the charges because of a video or a text message he sent. But Tamara Lich should, to use the vernacular that we all know, she should absolutely walk.
Now, Ari, the defense argued that the two simply exercised the right to assembly and expression as part of a legal protest, but many would say that the Trudeau government just wants to make an example of Lich and Barber. How do you see it?
This is all about silencing speech that the Trudeau government doesn't like. Anybody who disagrees with that is quite frankly naive. This is all about chilling speech because you see no attempt on the Trudeau government to silence the speech of Hamas, who are occupying downtown cities throughout this country. Maybe if you live in a rural area, you're immune from this, but where I live, you can't even go downtown without the streets being taken over by Hamas. Now, for some reason, that's called freedom of speech, association, a protest. But what Tamara Lich and Chris Barber have done is keeps being called an occupation, like we're in the West Bank. So words matter. And in my view, again, when you send 2 homicide detectives to Calgary, people forget this. Tamara Lich did about 50, 60 nights in jail. They sent 2 murder detectives to go get her on a Canada-wide warrant because she took a picture with somebody. That tells you, to use a U.S. term, about the justice system being weaponized. And I have said very, very openly that this is a prosecution of Tamara Lich that should never have been. And if Chris Barber was offered a simple plea to the stupid text or video he said about honking the horns if the police come, you and I would not be talking about this now.
Ari Goldkind, criminal defense lawyer, thanks so much for joining us today from Toronto. Premier Daniel Smith says a jury's decision finding 2 men guilty for their role in the 2022 Coutts border blockade must be respected. A Lethbridge jury found Chris Carbert and Anthony Olenek guilty of mischief and possession of weapons for a dangerous purpose last month. They were found not guilty, however, of the most serious charge of conspiracy to commit murder. Premier Smith says Albertans should feel confident in the justice system. Olenek and Carbert were each sentenced to 6.5 years in prison. Premier Smith also says our province may have a very difficult question to answer if a federal review on Alberta's share of the Canada Pension Plan is too low. The UCP says it deserves more than half of the National Retirement Plan if it were to withdraw, which translates to around $334 billion. The province also argued that Alberta is getting a raw deal under the National Retirement Plan. Premier Smith has faced continued pressure from party members pushing for action on the file. Prime Minister Justin Trudeau says he would like to see Air Canada and a union representing its pilots resolve a dispute as quickly as possible to avoid a strike. Trudeau says he's putting pressure on both parties to settle outstanding issues, including wages. A deadline looms for the workers' union and the airline to iron out a new agreement, or we could see a strike as early as next week.
Of course, we've been following the Air Canada situation closely, and we remain firm that the best deals happen at the bargaining table, and that's where parties need to keep working. The minister's actually going to be meeting with the parties today to impress on them the fact that millions of Canadians are counting on everyone to get this resolved.
We're going to fight back. If there's any bills being proposed on back-to-work legislation, we're going to oppose that. We're going to fight back against that. We're never going to support back to work.
Some services, including cargo and vacation packages, are already feeling the effects of the potential work stoppage by Air Canada. Russian President Vladimir Putin made comments in St. Petersburg about the possibility of NATO supplying Ukraine with long-range capable missiles to strike further into Russian territory. He says that would completely change the essence of the conflict and explains how doing so will mean direct involvement of NATO in the war with Ukraine.
Наносить удары современными высокоточными системами большой дальности западного производства украинская армия не в состоянии. Она не может этого делать. Это возможно только с использованием разведданных со спутников, которыми Украина не располагает. Это данные только со спутников или Евросоюза, либо на Соединенных Штатах, в общем, с натовских спутников. Это первое. Второе, и очень важное, может быть, ключевое, заключается в том, что полетные задания в эти ракетные системы могут, по сути, вносить только военнослужащие стран НАТО. Украинские военнослужащие делать этого не могут. Если это решение будет принято, это будет означать не что иное, как прямое участие стран НАТО, Соединенных Штатов, европейских стран в войне на Украине. А если это так, то, имея в виду изменение самой сути этого конфликта, мы будем принимать соответствующие решения, исходя из тех угроз, которые нам будут создаваться.
Prime Minister Justin Trudeau also expressed that Canada fully supports Ukraine using long-range weaponry in preventing Russia from striking civilian infrastructure in Ukraine and says ending the war is Putin's choice to make. Federal Health Minister Mark Cullen says Canada's made a large vaccine donation to African nations struggling with Mpox to help prevent further spread of the virus. He says Canada will provide around 200,000 vaccine doses to the hard-hit continent. While the donation is welcome, health officials say it's just a drop in the bucket towards the roughly 10 million doses that are needed. Global Affairs Canada pledged to contribute $1 million last month after the World Health Organization declared a global health emergency over the disease. Well, it started out overcast and soggy here in Lethbridge, but quickly cleared up. Beautiful day. Jeanette Rocher is in now with a quick peek at the forecast. Jeanette, it looks like the rain tapered off just in time for the weekend.
Yeah, as of around 11 a.m., the sky just opened up and made way for a beautiful sunny day, albeit a little bit windy. We saw those 30 to 50K winds today, but we reached that daytime high of 20 degrees, which is our seasonal high for this time of year. So we are right at seasonal. And then this evening, we could see a slight chance of showers, but then into Saturday, seeing that sun shine again, not quite reaching 20 degrees tomorrow, staying just underneath at 19. But speaking of the weekend, I will be back later in the show to give you that full weekend and 7-day forecast.
Great. Thanks so much, Jeanette. Officials offered an update on the wildfire recovery taking place in Jasper. Now, they say progress has been made on recovery efforts following the summer wildfire, which wiped out around 30% of homes and businesses in the town. The mayor of Jasper, Richard Ireland, says the challenge they face is to not only support residents impacted by the wildfire, but also to support economic activity for their region.
Jasper prides itself on being a welcoming, friendly destination. Sharing this beautiful place we are so fortunate to call home with visitors from across Canada and around the world. The gradual resumption of our necessary visitor economy will reduce the risk of some returning residents falling into further adversity from prolonged unemployment. To protect residents' privacy and peace of mind while economic activity resumes, we have placed signage to encourage local traffic only in the west end of town to allow support teams and residents in those areas to continue their recovery. We ask that visitors respect all those areas with restricted access and avoid driving through and taking pictures of the parts of town most impacted by the wildfire.
All of us would agree that child abuse should never be tolerated. Child Abuse Prevention Month is coming up next month in October. In recognition, the Chinook Sexual Assault Centre is promoting their 50-50 draw. The group's executive director, Christine Cassie, explains where the money will be going.
Create awareness and interventions, hopefully, for the public to take on issues of child abuse, and that's both for sexual abuse, neglect, emotional abuse, and physical abuse that may be happening towards kids in our province. We have a great focus on how we can actually intervene and stop child abuse from happening in our neighborhoods. Last year alone, we saw, I think, between the two programs, about 240 children that have experienced some form of sexual, physical abuse or neglect in our communities. We estimate in the province of Alberta it's about 1 in 3 that are impacted by some sort of abuse under the age of 18. We do a lot of education in our community around what child abuse, what sexual abuse, how these things happen in our communities and actions that we can take to actually stop that. Child abuse is 100% preventable in our communities, that there are ways that this can be stopped. And it's something that we do need to invest in.
By the way, the Chinook Sexual Assault Centre is the only standalone sexual assault centre located here in southern Alberta. Terry Fox's legacy continues beyond years and ages. A very special walk of hope was carried out by the Green Acres Foundation here in Lethbridge. Heidi Echevarria has that story.
Terry Fox's legacy lives on in the hearts of children and adults alike. Teachings that Fox left behind continue to touch hearts and raise funds for a good cause: cancer research. Today, Green Acres Foundation hosted a Silver Fox Walk fundraising. Terry Fox's uncle was also affected by cancer and shares how he has benefited from the walks of hope held in honor of his nephew.
It's helped me out because the people have donated lots of money, millions and millions of dollars to fight cancer, and we are winning the war. We haven't won it, but we are in the process of winning it. I'm still here after 21 years of cancer. 10 years prostate and now 11 years bladder cancer. And I'm still here, like I say, and I thank him and all the good people that put their money out. When he was in the hospital, he told me about they couldn't put him in the adults ward because it was full. So they said, Terry, we got to put you downstairs in the children's ward. And he told me, he said, Uncle Terry, when I got down there, I could see some of the kids had no hair left. They were bald. There were some kids that even couldn't get out of bed anymore. There's, you know, he said, I've stopped feeling sorry for myself once I saw these kids. He said, which was good, you know. He said it really made me feel, you know, that I'm better off. And then he dawned on him that he heard there was very little research doing for fight the cancer. So that's when he got the idea to maybe run across Canada and raise money, eh? And his poor dear mother wanted him to just run across British Columbia, not all of Canada. But he said, Mom, I made up my mind. I'm running across Canada. And sure enough, he tried it.
The CEO of Green Acres Foundation explains what this event represents for them.
This activity gives us the opportunity to put on an event so our residents can become part of the community. Everyone knows about the Terry Fox Run, and so for our senior residents, they want to be part of this community. They want to give back to the community in any way they can. And it's a good time for a party, a barbecue, and a little walk around the park. So they get the physical, but they also get the emotional aspect of this. The namesake of the very famous Terry Fox lives with us, and he actually named Terry Fox too. He is the namesake. He's very passionate about this, so we need to actually help support him in his quest too. So we put on this event every year, the Silver Fox event, to bring people together and just to bring people to the forefront. But cancer is still here. We're doing everything we can to fight it and beat this thing, but we will continue to do this.
Although Terry Fox is no longer with us, his legacy of marathon hope continues. For Bridge City News, I'm Heidi Echavarria.
He was such an incredible inspiration, Miss Terry Fox. Well, it's nice to see that the rain clouds have moved on across much of southwestern Alberta, and a beautiful weekend is shaping up. A full look at the weather picture is on deck. You know, we started off with lots of overcast skies and showers here in Lethbridge earlier today, but then the clouds moved on and it was a beautiful sunshiny day. Jeanette Rocher is in now with all of the weather details. Jeanette, the weekend is also shaping up to be quite nice as well.
It is. Now, the weekend, not quite seeing the 20-degree day that we saw today. Almost, though, just a little under. We're seeing 19 for the high on Saturday, 18 on Sunday. So all in all, still not a bad weekend for September. Also, we're going to see some windy conditions. So 20 to 40K winds, and then gusting up to 60K winds on a Saturday. And then as we get into our work week, next week, that's where we're going to see that 20 degrees again on Monday. And then we won't see the rain again until Tuesday and Wednesday, with highs of 17 and 16 on those days respectively, and then back to 19 degrees on Thursday. So overall, we are kind of sticking in those high teens. Average high for this time of year, 20 degrees, average low, 5 degrees. Our record high on this day happened back in 2013. That is, it was 31 degrees. And the record cold on this day was -7, and that happened back in 1915. Look at that. Okay, 7:05, that is when the sun rose this morning. Sunset this evening at 7:47. We're now seeing 12 hours, 41 minutes of daylight, 4 minutes less daylight than we saw yesterday. Okay, we're looking at a 60% chance of showers tomorrow in Victoria, 17 for the high, 18 in Vancouver, looking at showers there as well. Rain beginning around noon in Edmonton tomorrow, 14 for the high, 17 in Calgary, with a mix of sun and cloud there. As we look to the rest of the prairies here, we're seeing increasing clouds in the afternoon in Saskatoon, 22 for the high, sunshine in Regina, could see up to 60K winds there though, 25 the expected high in Winnipeg with nice clear skies. So Winnipeg still experiencing some great weather. As we look to the central part of the country, Toronto, 27, 28 in Ottawa, and 27 as well in Montreal. And these areas also experiencing high humidex, around 34. So definitely still feeling like summer in the central part of the country. And then as we get to the East Coast, 21 in Fredericton with mainly sunny skies. Halifax could see some showers, 24 high there. Clear skies in Charlottetown, 18, and 5 millimeters of rain expected tomorrow in St. John with up to 50K winds, high of 16 there. So there you have it. That is your forecast.
Canada's largest airline says cargo and vacation packages are among the services being affected as the clock ticks down to a potential shutdown because of a labor dispute with its pilots. Air Canada's already called for Ottawa to be ready to intervene to avoid major disruptions. Airline officials say a shutdown would impact more than 110,000 travelers a day. Both sides will be in a position to either issue a strike notice or lockout as of Sunday, which could lead to a full work stoppage as early as Wednesday. Canada Bread says Maple Leaf Foods is using it as a shield to avoid liability in an alleged bread price fixing scheme. The alleged scheme is the subject of 2 class action lawsuits and an ongoing Competition Bureau investigation. Canada Bread claims that Maple Leaf Food broke the law and breached its management agreements. Company officials say Maple Leaf should be liable for any damages it has or will sustain from the investigation and lawsuits. Maple Leaf's senior vice president says the company rejects all claims by Canada Bread, noting Maple Leaf acted appropriately at all times. BMO Financial Group has won the reversal of a 2022 jury verdict against the Canadian bank in a lawsuit related to a U.S. Ponzi scheme. BMO says the U.S. 8th Circuit Court of Appeals also instructed the district court to enter judgment in favor of the bank's U.S. subsidiary. Officials say BMO now plans to reverse a $1.19 billion provision. It expects that move will mean an after-tax recovery of around $875 million in its fourth quarter. Now, here's a look at today's markets.
The TSX was up 93 points on the day to finish at 23,568. The Dow was up 297 points to 41,393. The S&P 500 was up 30 to 5626, and the Nasdaq was up 114 points to finish at 17,683. West Texas Intermediate oil was up 23 cents to 69.18 US per barrel. Natural gas was down 6 cents to 2.30 US. Gold was up 19.35 to 25.7816 US an ounce, and silver was up 82 cents to $30.70 US an ounce. Feed wheat is at $7.62 per bushel, barley's at $5.99, canola's at $12.33, and corn is at $7.44 per bushel. Live cattle October contract was down $1.30 to $183.15. Feeder cattle were down 15 cents to $241.90. Lean hogs October contract was up 90 cents to $87.33, and the Canadian dollar was down slightly over the past 24 hours to 73.54 US.
Recapping one of our top stories, Lethbridge police have charged a 28-year-old man with attempted murder after he allegedly attacked a 27-year-old woman at her home on September the 10th. Corbin John Maxwell of Lethbridge also faces charges of housebreaking with intent. He is scheduled to appear in court on September the 17th. There's a group which says it is fighting for parents' rights in schools. Now, the group calls itself the Alberta Parents Union. We'll hear from the executive director of the group, Jeff Park, who will share his concerns with us in just a moment. When you see news happening in your community, be sure to send us an email at info@bridgecitynews.ca. Also, be sure to visit our website anytime to check out a number of stories and interviews. Parental rights in education continues to be a point of contention between school boards, teachers, politicians, parents, and students. Who ultimately has the final say when it comes to our kids? Are our children being given the best environment and tools needed to excel? Joining us to chat about it from Lethbridge to tackle some of the issues is Jeff Park. He's the executive director of the Alberta Parents Union. Jeff, welcome to Bridge City News.
Thanks for having me, Hal.
Now, first of all, can you explain to our viewers what your organization is really all about?
Absolutely. The Alberta Parents Union came out of the response really to parents learning over the course of the pandemic and Zoom school and so forth. Parents got a good hard look at what was going on and what was failing to go on in their children's education. And parents can't unsee what they saw during those days. And it's led to a lot more activism, a lot more parents wanted to get involved because we recognize that parents are the real experts in their own kids. There may be people more expert in curriculum design or in teaching a certain subject or in a certain kind of pedagogy than we are as parents, which is why it's totally fine for us to hire those people to help us with our kids. But there's no one more expert in my 8, 6, 5, and 3-year-old than me. except on her very best days, their mother. And so we know that parents are the real experts in their own kids, so we don't want to have a system where we're certainly excluding parents or lying to parents, hiding information from parents, and that's the real motivation behind our organization more than anything else.
Jeff, I see that you're in the midst of a back-to-school tour here in Southern Alberta. Can you tell us a bit about that?
Absolutely. So we're going to be in Picture Butte at the Picture Butte Community Center from 6 to 8 p.m. on Monday, September 16th. We're going to be in Red Cliff at the Red Cliff Youth Center, just outside Medicine Hat, in on September 17th. That's a Tuesday from 6 to 8 p.m. also. And then we're going to be right here in Lethbridge at the German Canadian Club. That's on Wednesday, September 18th from 6 to 8 p.m. We're going to be in Nanton at Nanton Baptist Church on Monday, September 23rd from 6 to 8 p.m. And we're going to be in High River at the Shepherd Family Park that's Tuesday, September 24th from 6 to 8 p.m. And all of those events are totally free. Anyone's welcome to come, but we would ask that you go to albertaparentsunion.ca/events and RSVP, because it does cost us money to put them on, and we'd like to know how many people are coming, how many to prepare for, and it's also obviously we will happily accept donations towards the cost of these events. But really, the idea is to get out there and hear from parents directly as we're getting back to school with new policy announcements, and we're a year out from school board elections on October 25th or October 20th, 2025. We'll have new school board elections, and we do find that school board is sort of the order of government that parents need the most help understanding what goes on and how things are working out at the school board level. So we're obviously happy to answer those questions as well.
Now, Jeff, can you update us on the ongoing debate over students changing their pronouns or names, transitioning genders, sex education, and informing parents about all of these things?
Absolutely. So we did get an announcement from Danielle Smith on January 31st that in Alberta we will be having parents having to consent for a child to change their name or pronouns at school up until age 16, and even for 16 and 17-year-old children, parents will have to be informed. So schools will no longer be able to have policies of keeping these things secret from parents, which was the majority, the vast majority actually, of Alberta school boards currently have such a policy. And so I shouldn't say was, it still is the case, because while the announcement happened on January 31st of this year, there have been no actual policy changes or implementation yet. Now, we've been assured that we will see all of that in law, in policy, in regulation by the time of the UCP AGM and the leadership review of Danielle Smith. And I would hazard to say that her fidelity and delivering on what she promised on these issues will probably be the deciding factor in how well she does in that leadership review on November 2nd.
Now, Jeff, parents are quite concerned over what's being taught in our schools, and not necessarily the curriculum itself, but apparently school boards and principals as well. Now, you've expressed concern that individual teachers are allegedly being allowed to bring in all sorts of extra content into the classrooms that maybe falls outside of the official curriculum. Can you explain?
That's right. So the Alberta curriculum is what, and I think a lot of folks in Alberta get U.S. news, and when they say curriculum in the U.S., they're talking about something set by a school board, and we're talking about a lot more content and the actual books that are being used and all that kind of thing. When we use the word curriculum in Canada, we mean what Americans tend to call standards. The state standards is what they would call them in the U.S. states, and so it's really a lot less detailed, and that is set by the province. And really, there is no sexual orientation or gender identity content in that. There's not really that much that raises parents' concern at that level. Obviously, we engage on the curriculum as well, and we're looking for improvements on the curriculum as well. But for the most part, that's not where parents really direct their ire. It really is more at these outside materials that are brought in. And just for a few examples, we know that the Alberta Teachers Association's library has a wide range of resources for teachers that are informed by critical race theory, and they promote them all the time. We know that St. Albert Public Schools quietly introduced a 2S LGBTQIA plus course for junior high. They did consult on that course and had it developed by the newest senator from Alberta, Chris Wells, but they did not consult parents on any of this material. And there's a Canadian company called Less Plan that sells pre-built lesson plans, and some of them talk about the health and environmental benefits of eating crickets, for instance, or they'll put an ideological spin on the events at the United States Capitol building on January 6, 2021. So this is a Canadian company making material for Canadian school children, but it's very much influenced by those U.S. political controversies. And then we know that many principals require teachers to include a climate emphasis week, sometimes without informing parents, and include that in all the classrooms. We know that the Alberta Teachers Association has a recommended resource that says that the real problem, the real reason that there is a climate crisis, and the real reason that we're not going to be able to get over it until we get over the idea that there is such a thing as private property. They say private property is the real problem that's causing the climate crisis. And then finally, we know that the ATA also developed the PRISM toolkit, that's PRISM, like the thing that turns white light into a rainbow, which gives specific lesson plans to teach about human sexuality while evading the requirement to inform parents. Fortunately, the Alberta government has listened to our concerns about that and our petition on this topic, and all the concerns that our parents have brought to the Alberta government. And now these outside materials, if they touch on human sexuality, or so not all of these issues, but if they touch on human sexuality, sexual orientation, or gender identity, the ministry will have to approve those materials before they're allowed to be used in the classroom. We would like them to take it one step further and address a lot of these ideological issues, but also we would like them to put this more in the hands of parents. If you're going to have ministry review anyway, then it's very easy to just assign a number to this and have teachers, principals, individual schools let parents know, here's the catalog of things we're using in your kid's class, so that you can have some insight into the kinds of ideological materials that are making it into the kids' class.
So Jeff, you've made a number of claims here regarding the outside materials, and do you have substantial proof as well?
Absolutely, yes. So, so the PRISM toolkit you can look up online. There's a elementary education version and there's a high school version. The Alberta Teachers Association promotes it widely. They're very proud of it. And as far as anything else, these are all easily accessible, easily proved things that we can absolutely point to. We know are coming into the classrooms. We know are being, in many cases, encouraged to be brought into the classrooms by the Alberta Teachers Association, which does, after all, it is supposed to be the organization licensing teachers and suggesting whether a teacher should have their license pulled and all that kind of thing. So that does exert some influence into the kinds of resources that teachers use.
So if parents have a lot of concerns, where should they really voice those concerns?
Absolutely. So you can always have a conversation with the individual classroom teacher, with the principal, but if you voice your concerns with a trustee, they will often point you to another bureaucrat in the school division that they're going to say is sort of more responsible for that decision. But we encourage, if you have if you have a real issue with the kinds of things that are coming into the classroom, with the sorts of policies that are being set at the school board level, even if the trustees claim that they're not really setting those policies, you should always go to your trustee, because your trustee is the one that you can fire, frankly. And you can't fire the other educrats between the trustees and the teachers, and you can't fire the teacher. The only person that you have any influence over is your trustee. So we always encourage people, go to your trustee, bring everything through them, even if they're going to send you to someone else. Make sure to do that. And we'll remind people that your opportunity to fire your trustee is coming up on October 20th of 2025. And it would be useful to have someone who does want to support parents, grandparents, taxpayers, and not be quite so beholden to the educrats if that is the thing that's bothering you in your school.
So Jeff, where are we at when it comes to Alberta students learning how to read? I understand that there are some concerns about the methods being used to really teach basic reading skills. Tell me more about that.
Absolutely. Unfortunately, as of 2022, we know, so we know for sure that some things have changed in a positive direction since then, but we haven't gotten a real strong number since 2022 on the sorts of resources that are being used. And we know that at that time, it was 55.7% of responding Alberta school authorities were using the same resource, the Fountas and Pinnell set of resources for student assessment and intervention. And those resources are widely discredited throughout the English-speaking world. The Fountas and Pinnell benchmark assessment system, for instance, successive studies have shown that it is no better and actually worse than flipping a coin at identifying the students that actually struggle with reading so that we can get them more help. But then even worse, the kind of help that is brought in that intervention, studies have shown is actually worse than no intervention whatsoever. And this was being widely used. Fortunately, places like Calgary, the Calgary Board of Education, have finally responded to the abysmal track record of these resources and have promised to fully de-implement the Fountas and Pinnell system. But we look through the education plans for a lot of school boards and still see the Fountas and Pinnell benchmark assessment system. We still see those interventions. We still see them spending quite a bit on professional development to have teachers. It's $3,300 a day per teacher to have teachers taught this system that we know is worse than doing nothing. And so that's a great concern of us and our parents, especially for parents, obviously, whose kids do struggle reading, whether that be because of dyslexia or because of other learning disabilities, or just because they were never taught. And unfortunately, the Fountas and Pinnell system, one of the reasons it's so damaging is it actually sort of teaches kids to fake an ability to read instead of learning to read. It teaches kids the skills that poor readers use to cover up for their inability to read, rather than teaching them to focus on the letters. So that's the ideology behind Fountas and Pinnell, and these other 3Qing is the term for it. Systems, there are others active in Alberta, but Fountas and Pinnell is the big one. Other 3Qing systems, the idea, there's this ideology that you don't want to look at the letters to learn what the word says. You want to look at the greater context of the sentence and all this stuff. And when the sentences get longer and the pictures go away, kids are no longer able to fake it quite so much as they are in the earlier grades. And we know that if kids don't learn to read by grade 3, on average, most kids, if they don't learn to read by grade 3, they never will. So it's a really damaging thing to have this placebo effect, if you will, where kids seem like they know how to read until they start getting to the very grades where it may be too late to help them with their reading ability.
Jeff Park is the Executive Director of the Alberta Parents Union. Jeff, thanks so much for your time today.
Thanks so much.
A recent study turned up some interesting results about what Canadian Christians actually believe. The study investigates if these beliefs are consistent with what an individual's Christian denomination belief is and if they match what the Bible teaches. So joining me from Ottawa is Reverend Dr. Andrew Bennett. He is the Faith Communities Program Director at Cardis, a Christian think tank, and the author of the study, Still Christian? What Canadian Christians Actually Believe. Welcome back to Bridge City News, Dr. Bennett. Great to have you on again.
Thank you very much. It's wonderful to be with you.
Absolutely. Okay, so maybe tell us how you did the research for this study. You partnered with the Angus Reid Institute, right?
That's right. So we've had a long-standing partnership with the Angus Reid Institute going back about 7 years. They're our survey partners. So we developed the questionnaire in counterpart with them. And so the questionnaire really asks, first of all, we get people to tick the box. You know, what are you? Are you a Catholic? Are you an Anglican? Are you an evangelical? And if you're an evangelical, what type of evangelical Christian? Then we ask people a series of 7 questions through which we can sort of establish, okay, how religiously committed are you? How evangelical are you? How Catholic are you? And those questions are more than simply, do you go to church? We ask people whether they believe in God or a higher power. We ask them, do you read the Bible regularly? Do you have an experience of God in your life? Do you want your children educated according to your faith tradition? And then that gives us a sense of how committed they are. Then what we did in this study is we posed 20 statements, some of which touched on doctrinal matters, so what churches teach, and some looking at moral questions. And we asked people to either agree or disagree with those statements, and they could agree or disagree strongly or somewhat. And so we had a sample size of just over 2,000 Canadians, of which just over 50% were Christians. And then that broke down into the 3 main groups that we looked at were Catholics, mainline Protestants, and then evangelicals. And that's as defined by Statistics Canada.
Okay. Now, in your research, you said 81% of evangelicals believe the resurrection of Jesus as a historical event, but only 48% of Catholics and 55% of mainline Protestants hold that belief. So that's a big disconnect, isn't it?
It's a major problem. The question I think we have to look at first is, how is a person an evangelical Christian? How is someone a Catholic? How is someone a member of a mainline Protestant denomination? With evangelical Christianity, it's a fairly cut and dry understanding. You're either in or you're not. So you're either fully in, you're committed to your particular evangelical denomination, or you're not. Former evangelical Christians typically don't call themselves evangelicals still, whereas there are a lot of Anglicans, Presbyterians, and certainly Catholics who are baptized in that church or those denominations, but they've lapsed, so to speak. They don't go regularly to church. They're probably not reading the Bible often. But they're still kind of in the family, right? So we had the Archbishop Emeritus of Toronto, Cardinal Thomas Collins, speak to us at the launch event for the report. And he said, if someone asks the Archbishop of Toronto, how many Catholics are there in Toronto? He'll reply, 2 million. But how many of those go to church on a regular basis? Maybe 300,000. So there's a different way in being evangelical as opposed to how Catholics are and mainline Protestants are. Now, that being said, the fact that barely half of Catholics and mainline Protestants believe that the central truth of the Christian faith, that Jesus Christ rose from the dead on the 3rd day for our salvation, that only half of them believe that that's an actual historical fact, is quite shocking. It points to a significant deficiency, I would say, in not only them being catechized, being instructed in their faith, but also just basic evangelization, asking the question that's so essential, who is Jesus Christ? And so I think we need to, maybe in a future study, dig into that a little bit deeper. Why is there this profound incoherence between someone who ticks the box and says, I'm a Catholic, but then half of them will say, well, I don't actually believe that the resurrection is a historical fact. Why is that? This survey doesn't really point to that specifically, but we can certainly come up with some hypotheses that we'd like to explore later.
Yeah, I mean, I find this research of yours interesting. You called it shocking before we hit record there. But another finding was that 65% of evangelicals disagreed that Christian moral teachings should evolve with changes in society's attitudes, whereas 72% of Catholics and 61% of mainline Protestants agreed. So in other words, a majority of Catholics and mainline Protestants believe God's moral values are subject to changes imposed by modern society.
Yeah, again, this is a major challenge, and I think it reflects the nature of let's say, the ocean that all of us are swimming in. Evangelical Christians, in part because of this distinction I mentioned earlier, where if you're an evangelical Christian, you're either in or you're out, you're going to see higher numbers of evangelicals disagreeing with this statement. But for those Catholics and mainline Protestants who, again, tick the box, that's what I am, how faithful I am, well, that's another matter. But these, like all of us, we're swimming in a sea of secularism. And the main sort of secular ideas that we inhabit and that we live with in Canada, even as Christians, are that truth is not objective, truth is relative. That you can have your truth, I can have my truth. Well, of course, from a Christian perspective, that's nonsensical. We believe that truth is not a set of ideas that fluctuates with the age or that changes with the wind, but rather truth is a person. Truth is Jesus Christ. But when we kind of divorce ourselves from that objective reality of what is truth, Pontius Pilate's eternal question, what is truth? When we divorce ourselves from that and we see truth as something that is subjective, all about me and not objective, existing despite what my opinions might be, we can get into this situation where we think, oh, well, I mean, if society thinks that something is true or something that is good, or the law, for example, says that euthanasia is okay, or same-sex marriage is okay, or some of the real hot-button issues of our day, if the law says that that's true, well, then it must be true. And so people accept that without looking at it, through the lens of Christian tradition or through the lens of an anthropology, how we understand the human person that is informed by Christ. And so I think, again, Catholics and Protestants, mainline Protestants, have been more willing, unfortunately, to embrace that subjectivism, that individual autonomy that exists in the secular world. Again, by I think not being as well formed as they could be in their own Christian tradition.
Okay, well, one of the part of the study that I found most surprising was a finding that younger Canadian Christians display a stronger commitment to the teachings and practices of their faith compared to older generations. So can you maybe unpack that for us a little bit?
Certainly. What we found consistently across various of the doctrinal questions and some of the moral questions is that in the 18 to 34 age cohort, there is both, and we know this from past studies we did with the Angus Reid Institute, there's a greater percentage of people in that age group who are not religious. They're not religiously engaged at all, much higher than the general population. But there's also a larger number of them, often to a degree of up to 5 or 6%, if memory serves me, who are more religiously committed than their parents' generation or their grandparents' generation. So why is this? I think because now there is no social pressure to be in church. There's no cultural reality that says, well, to be a good person, to be a faithful person, you need to be a Christian, or whatever the argument might be. That's no longer present. The world is telling most people, well, you don't need to be a Christian to be a good person. You don't have to believe in an objective truth to live a full and rich human life. But what we're seeing is that more and more young people are challenging that view of the world, that sort of secular, individualistic, materialistic view of the world, and saying, well, that hasn't done me much good. And I'm looking for something that is true. I want something that is not about me, but about something transcendent that goes beyond me. that I can enter into and live authentically and with integrity. And so I think we're seeing maybe the dawn of a new religious age, especially amongst younger Canadians. And those of us that are active in pastoral ministry, working in churches as pastors, as ministers, as priests, as deacons across the country, I think many of us would tell you that we're seeing this play out in the pews, that younger Canadians who have felt sort of adrift in this sea of secularism are coming back to the church, often as totally blank slates. They don't really know much about Christianity, but when they discover a Christian faith that is lived authentically and with great integrity, they gravitate towards it like moths to a flame, and they want to live it out fully. And so I think this survey again reveals that they want to live something that is true, not something that is relativistic.
Mm-hmm. Were there any other findings that surprised you with this?
I was a little bit surprised. We asked a question about whether the government or the church is the primary sort of keeper of people, as the primary purveyor of social services. Should the government be doing that, or does the church have a particular responsibility to care for the poor, to help the elderly, to visit those in prison, everything that's mentioned in the gospel? And again, there's a significant cleavage between evangelical Christians and then mainline Protestants and Catholics on the other side. But even still, there was certainly a significant number of evangelicals who bought into this idea that no, government has the primary responsibility for social justice, if we want to use that language, or has the particular responsibility for charitable works. Well, government can have some role, and it's important that government have that role, but the church also has a role. And the church and government need to work together, as they have for many, many decades, to fulfill the needs of society. But it can't just be government, because government often is not able to get to the most local level where people need the greatest care. It's the churches and other religious communities that are running the 12-step programs in the church basement, or the refugee resettlement programs, or providing care for new mothers, or helping people with English as a second language, or the Boy Scouts or the Girl Guides. I think most Canadians know that in their local community, there are various churches and perhaps synagogues and gurdwaras that are fulfilling those roles. I wrote an article some years ago that was entitled, "Will the State Hug Me When I Die?" No, because the state can't do that. That's not the role of the state. That's the role of the Christian community and of the people that we are closest to. And so we have to, I think, have a much more nuanced understanding of the interplay between church and state. It can't just be the state, nor can it simply be just the church. But given the nature of our pluralist society, the two need to work in concert with one another. But as Christians, we know that as members of the body of Christ, as members of the church, we have a particular responsibility, as our Savior calls us, to care for the poor, the sick, the marginalized, those in prison, and so forth.
Was there much of a difference between how the three different groups responded to that one? Did you notice a variation, or was it just kind of the same?
Again, there was that similar cleavage between evangelical Christians who were largely a little bit concerned about placing the state first, but mainline Protestants and Catholics really have sort of accepted what we might call a statist idea, that the state is ultimately responsible for caring for those in need. And I think that's troubling. I think it's a misunderstanding of how there needs to be that dialogue between church and state. There needs to be coordination and cooperation between church and state. And this has major impacts on current policy debates in this country. So, for example, should faith communities, should charitable institutions that are faith-based have charitable status? Should they be able to issue tax receipts? Is the advancement of religion, which has been a core form of charity, of charitable activity for centuries, should that still be enshrined in law? And I think as Christians, we recognize what Christians do in the world and other faith communities do. And so I think we need to, again, ensure that we have a right understanding of that relationship between church and state.
So really quickly, what are the takeaways from this study? What can we learn from this?
Well, I think the first thing to say is that we should not, although it's shocking, some of these findings, I don't think we should go running around as Christians and as Christian leaders with a sort of the sky is falling attitude, or the end is nigh. I don't think that's helpful. Rather, I think we need to see this as an opportunity to rethink, what are we doing? How do we evangelize people? How do we catechize or instruct people in the faith, from preschoolers all the way up to adults? And how do we support people in living a public faith when they are challenged by what the world offers? How do they offer an effective Christian response to that? And I think that this study should be a clarion call, should be a wake-up call to us as Christian leaders and as faithful Christians, that we need to pull up our socks and think of new ways to live out our Christian life and to instruct people, inform people in the faith, and therefore proclaim the gospel in the world.
All right, looks like we're out of time here, but thanks so much for joining us today, Dr. Bennett. Great to have you on.
Thank you.
Dr. Andrew Bennett is the Faith Communities Program Director at Cardis and the author of the study, Still Christian? What Canadian Christians Actually Believe. You can read the entire study online at www.cardis.ca. I'm Jeanette Roche on behalf of all of us here at Bridge City News. Thanks so much for joining us.